film is Big Eden. So first we're going to begin with a summary of the movie. So Big Eden is a movie about an artist named Henry Hart, and he is living in New York, and suddenly he gets news that his grandfather, who lives in the fictional town of Big Eden, Montana, has had a stroke, and so he leaves his art gallery opening to come back to Big Eden to take care of him. But while there, he runs into his childhood crush named Dean, who still has a bunch of complicated feelings about. But also there's this guy named Pike who is in love with Henry Hart, and so the movie is very largely about those relationships interacting with each other, but also about kind of Henry finding home again in his hometown.
So some trivia and important facts. The director is himself openly gay, and he both wrote and directed the film. It's his debut film, and with the exception of the opening sequence that's depicting New York, the entire film is shot in the state of Montana where it's taking place. And then, of course, Eden can be understood to mean a place of great delight or even paradise. The genre is romantic dramedy. It was nominated for limited release GLAAD Best Film, but it lost to Hedwig and the Angry Itch. It contains no sort of homophobic language, no characters are homophobic in what we see in the film, and it focuses, like Aaliyah said, on this love triangle where Henry Hart has crush on his childhood crush Dean, but he's trying to respond to that crush. But meanwhile, the general store manager, Pike, who is Native American, has feelings for Henry, our main character, but Henry doesn't know this for the most part.
Yeah. And so that's actually how we get to how this movie qualifies as a queer film. So it's the protagonist is openly gay, as far as we know when he's in New York. The movie's largely about how not many people in his hometown understand that he's gay. They all know, but he doesn't know that they know. And so it's very much kind of about him trying to find acceptance in this town, or trying to accept this town, and his place in it. As well as there's the major love triangle between Henry, Dean, and Pike. At the end of the movie, because Pike and Henry end up together, there's a very long kiss between the two at the end of the movie. As well as his relationship with Dean. And so Dean is understood to be a straight man, but him and Henry have a very complicated relationship, and they do kiss in the film. But after Dean pulls away from the kiss, he's I actually can't do this, And so you really could read Dean as bisexual, or you could just read him as a straight man who was just trying to figure out how to be close with his childhood best friend. As well as there are queer themes such as found family and home and coming out.
So in many of the movies that we see, or that we know of that are in the lexicon of queer film, there are characters that are outrightly told, you cannot come out, you cannot be yourself, in Moonlight, Boys Don't Cry. But this character is actually sort of pushed to come out to the townsfolk and to his grandfather, his family. And the town is very accepting of the three characters and their possible sexual orientation or their sexual orientation. And then the characters have a kiss scene in the final sequence where they're dancing in the middle of everyone around them. And the townspeople do not see them as a threat to their livelihood or to their town in general, but just as other human beings, as peers. And then we sort of ask this question of, should the audience, since this film was released in 2000, should the audience view this as sort of a fairy tale, an unconventional fairy tale, because this isn't the reality that we see in the 2000s in most rural areas of our country, but this is what's depicted by this filmmaker of a possibility.
Yeah, the town, there's this scene where Widow Thayer, who's a kind of a really old woman in the town, she brings all these women over to her house, and she introduces Henry to them, but then she realizes that Henry isn't interested in any of them, and then she changes face the very next scene where she brings all these guys that she knows from every town that she could possibly find, and then tries to introduce Henry to all of them until they realize the relationship with Pike. And so the town really does do their best to be as accepting to Henry as they possibly can be.
So we want to show you this scene. It's about 45 seconds to a minute, so we can play it, and hopefully the sound works and everything.
I always had a feeling about those two.
My gosh, you were right.
scene to this movie that the kiss is so long. And the
It's-
director said that he had to change anything about it, he would make it shorter. But like at the time, he was like, no, I gotta give it to them. I gotta like show them exactly what this is.
It's also like a great example of what we're talking about in terms of the town people. You hear this woman say she always had a feeling about these two being together, and her partner is like, oh yeah, you were right, and there's no sort of like tone of disgust or oh, that's not okay. It's just totally, I pegged them as being together and now they're together.
Yeah, like no one ever like treats anyone bad. They're always just like, listen, I just want you to be like happy and supported in the best way I can. Like there's this one like he's a guy who's at the general store, he's talking to Pike and he doesn't know that Pike's gay, but he realizes and he like really awkward about it. He comes up to him and he's like, I just want you to know that like, you know, I never thought, but it's good. It was kind of like their conversation. But it's like a really good movie because there's no homophobia. However, there is a lot of like, there's homophobia in like the world of it because of the fact that like Henry doesn't want to come out to his grandfather, but like there is just none depicted in the film, if that makes sense. So like this scene between Henry and his grandfather, when his grandfather tells him that he knows that he's gay.
Be able to look your grandma in the eye. I've done my job. Come here. Come here. Why can't you see how much love there is that people just want to pour on top of you? I can't help thinking that your grandma and I didn't do right by you somehow.
Grandpa, don't say that.
I feel like maybe we told you something wrong because you won't tell me who you are. Did we teach you shame? Did I teach you that? No. Because it would break my heart if I had. Can't you see what a good job God did here? Can't you see how beautiful it made you?
So yeah, that's like one of like the key films in the scene. Like director mentions that like whenever anyone mentions this movie to him, they mention like the "Did I teach you shame" scene. And so
Yeah, and so what's getting in the way of these characters and them being able to be together? And it's interesting because in a lot of other queer films that we're familiar with, it's typically their environment that's getting in the way of each of them being able to come together and date or fall in love. But it's actually the characters themselves in Big Eden. And so Henry's inability to come out to his grandfather and the rest of his community, and Pike's inability to admit feelings to Henry. So all of them are kind of stepping on their own toes to sort of be able to fulfill their hope of what it is they want to be able to do in the movie.
yeah. Also, just like Henry's inability to call Big Eden home, because like he left very specifically because he like realized that he was gay and he went through a lot of therapy and he was like, I can't live in this town anymore. But like he comes back and it just like it isn't the same. Like it never like really was this kind of like bad place for him. He just didn't realize how accepting it possibly could be. As well as the characters dealing with just like all of those very complicated emotions. So this is more from the director about like that scene because he was like kind of shocked that like that was the scene that people really loved from this movie, and he said that he didn't understand how universal the sense of shame could be, and that like it just is difficult being human. And Big Eden's a very like interesting queer film because like typically queer films are made for like queer people are supposed to like look at them and identify with the queer people in the film, and like straight people are supposed to just kind of understand and accept that. But like this movie is so different because like both like straight and queer people like very much identify with Henry. They identify with like his sense of shame and like his sense of like not wanting to be open to his world for like a number of reasons. And that's what kind of makes Big Eden very special as far in concerning like other queer films that are like it.
So what's different about this? We've already spoken to this a little bit, but just to sort of share the essence, there's no homophobia or racism. The movie is mostly about home and found family. The lack of tragedy centered around queerness, so no one's dying, no one's getting hurt, unless it's emotionally, of course.
Yeah.
And then it's set in a rural area that's actually accepting and affirming of these characters and their identity. And one of the main leads is a person of color. Pike is a Native American man.
Yeah. But yeah, because like that's really really what's kind of what's different is like usually in queer films the character who's experiencing some sort of like isolation is like kind of like a community induced, when really like this is very much like Henry himself wanting to accept the community that he has.
And then acceptance, just as the town openly supports and loves Henry, the movie is truly about Henry accepting that love and support himself. And Pike has to learn to accept help from others and be open to love and community. He can't do everything on his own. He has to be able to accept the support and help from others and their love.
And then there's just some quotes that we thought were really fun from the movie. Especially, I love the one that Pike says about him just wanting things to be nice for Henry. It's the last one. Because like he starts like making food for him and like passing it off as Widow Thayer's, and it's just like it's very sweet. And that's all we have for you.
Thank you all so much.